Well.
Starting to appreciate that sound more and more every time you do it.
Yes, it means good things to come, doesn't it?
That's right.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this fine radio program, podcast, and videocast known as Smokin' and Toastin'. It's show number 91. We are all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. We are brought to you by B&B Butchers and Restaurant at 1814 Washington Ave in Houston and in the shops at Clear Fork in Fort Worth. And my notes just went all over the place. So,
now we know nothing.
So thank you. It's been a great show.
Remember on Anchorman when the prompt went away?
Yes, absolutely nothing to say. And that surprises me not at all, by the way.
Right.
Having worked with some people in television, I can tell you this. People in television, they definitely have certain skills, but ad-libbing is generally not one of them. There are exceptions, of course. But anyway, we ad-lib pretty much the whole show here, so I think we'll be all right. And
right.
Adam got my papers back for me, so I at least have my notes in front of me.
If you wrote out my part, I'd have a hard time.
Yeah, exactly. So so we mentioned being brought to you by B&B Butchers, and we're at B&B Butchers live today, which let's just face it, this is one of our favorite places in the world. And so we're out on the top level here at B&B, and they've got it really set up. It's nice because although it's already warm in Texas, it's not too warm to be up here and enjoy a cigar, and that's what we're going to do on today's show. I don't know if Jeremiah will be joining us or not. He's been invited. We'll see if he makes it in, and if he does, he will be welcome.
That depends on how many fires he's got to put out all over the rest of this place.
So, speaking of fires, we have already lit our cigars. So, Ian, rather than tell me about what you smoked previously this week, tell me about what you just lit up there. That's an interesting-looking cigar.
I will look up more
for
information about this. This was I was at Lone Star Cigars, which is over off of 249 in Vintage Park, kind of Cypress area, I think, maybe, or south of Tomball. Maybe it's Klein. I can't remember. It's one of those little areas right there. But anyway, those guys are really nice over there, and I was chatting with one of the guys. I said, hey, what do you have new and fun? And he pointed me out. This is one of his favorites. He said it's the Tabernacle. I will look up more information about this, as I haven't had time yet, but I'll look up information on this on a break. But he highly recommended this. And in this size, now this is not a size I usually get a Lancero once in a long while, but he said that this particular cigar really shines in this particular size. Right.
Oh, interesting. So, well, I will say this is not a cigar that has crossed my path until you showed it to me just before we started the show. That's the first time I'd ever actually seen this cigar. And believe me, I comb through humidors pretty meticulously when I go to a cigar shop. So even if I'm not buying everything, I'm at least looking at what's there and going, oh, that's something I might try at some point.
Well, we had a little discussion about it, and he gave me a little history on it, which I'll impart on you probably in the next segment when I can look it up and kind of get my names straight on it. That's my problem, is I don't remember all the names and time and stuff he said. But this is starting off really nice. It's got a bit of spice. Well, that was the thing he asked me. He says, do you like a spicy cigar? I said, you know what, sometimes. I do today. So yes. He said this is a pretty spicy cigar. It's Nicaraguan. I believe it's Nicaraguan all the way through, so Nicaraguan Puro. I'll look that up again in just a little bit, but it's starting off as a great cigar. I've used a punch at first. The punch had it drawing a little too tight, so I went from the punch to the snip, right? Which is one of the nice things. When you start with a punch, if it draws great. But if it's a little too tight, you can always cut the end, and that opened it right up. So now it's starting off just nice.
Very
we'll see
nice.
how it goes. What are you smoking?
Well, this is one, and thank you, by the way, because I took this from your humidor. But this is it's the Esteban Carrera's, but it's the Chupacabra. So I was immediately drawn not only by the box press and the fact that it's a beautiful cigar, but I was immediately drawn by the Chupacabra, which is my favorite urban legend of all time. And I actually believe that Chupacabras exist. But
I didn't know it was a legend.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was just
a Chupacabra has actually never been sighted. But there are farmers who've had their goats killed, and they believe it was by this mystical Chupacabra as opposed to just coyotes or wolves, because apparently the Chupacabras suck the blood from the goats. And you can correct me on this if your Spanish is better than mine, but I believe that the word Chupacabra actually means goat sucker.
I think you're right.
In Spanish. So obviously it doesn't get more interesting in the mystical creature world than the Chupacabra. I would rather cite the Chupacabra than the Loch Ness Monster, if it were me.
The question is this: why goat's blood? Does goat's blood have a particular nutrient in it that chupacabra must have?
I don't know. Certainly, goat milk is a very different flavor and a very different vibe to it than other milk producing
mammals. So you have to wonder
so
if it's a convenience or an environment.
Maybe it's size. Maybe they're just the right size for the mythical chupacabra to take down.
Possible.
I don't know. I've always wanted to, if I ever owned a sports team, like if I ever make tons of money and buy the Dallas Cowboys, I'm changing their name.
Share our posts, by the way. Yeah. That'll help us make tons of money.
And then I'm changing their names. You have my word on this. They'll be the Dallas Chupacabras. So this is why you want to share our post, because you want to help make this come true.
The Dallas Chupacabras.
Wouldn't that be great?
That'd be amazing.
Yeah. Welcome to today's match between the Cleveland Browns and the Dallas Chupacabras. We'll be right back after this word from Budweiser about a beer that they bought from a craft brewer somewhere.
Right, something like that.
By the way, I wanted you to know, speaking of Budweiser buying beer from craft brewer, I was doing a little bit of research, and not the kind that you do, which involves sampling and lighting the cigar and whatever. But I was doing some research on just different stories for the show, and I ran across an article that excerpted some of the book that we mentioned on a previous show about Goose Island. The guy that has written, he's a journalist for, I believe, the Chicago Sun-Times, and he's their beer coverage person, and he's written a book about Goose Island, which is one of the first major craft breweries to be bought by by AB InBev, by one of the big guys, and what the process was like, what the missteps were on both Goose Island's side and on Budweiser's side, what it did to the brand, what it did to the beer, and how everything sort of, and from my understanding and from the excerpts I read, a pretty fair assessment. Like, it's not just a guy taking pot shots at big beer and saying, craft beer is the only thing that's good, but also acknowledging that, Budweiser didn't get into this because they thought, hey, this beer's really good. They got into it because they saw the trend coming,
a money-making process,
and got into it to make money. So anyway, the book excerpts that I read were absolutely, like, I was riveted. So I immediately went and bought the book for my Kindle. So I will be trying to enjoy that book across the summer. We'll see how much free reading time I get. But as I read it, I'll maybe, tell you some of the things that I'm discovering from it.
Myself.
It looks really, really
book club
good.
Discussion.
Yes, and I
awesome.
apologize. I'm not remembering the name of the book off the top of my head, but I will get it in the break and tell you in the next segment. So, but it is it's something about barrel aged and something. But anyway, I'll get to that. We're going to do some great tasting on the show today. We are going to be tasting what I believe to be a new beer out of Sierra Nevada. It's the Otra Vez. It's an ale brewed with lime and agave. It might not be new. It might just be a seasonal, but it has reappeared on shelves where I've been shopping.
Might be a seasonal.
Yeah.
I think I've seen that before. I don't think I've ever tried that one.
Yes, and I haven't either. Generally speaking, I'm not real fond of most of those lighter beers that try to incorporate a spirit, like the tequila beers. I'm not crazy about some of the different ones. Bourbon barrel aging's a different thing. But anyway, this one looks interesting, and Sierra Nevada has never steered me wrong. Those guys know what they're doing.
I have an update on your previous discussion. It's called Barrel Aged Stout and Selling Out.
Thank you. And the author's name, I don't remember off the top of my head, but we'll get that for you. Barrel-aged stout and selling out.
Barrel-aged stout and selling out.
I'll tell you, if the whole book is as good as the excerpts I read, if the whole book is as good as the excerpts that I read, I'm going to love this read.
So the full title, it says Josh Noel is the author.
Josh Noel.
Barrel-aged stout and selling out, Goose Island, Anheuser-Busch, and how craft beer became big business.
All right. So right now, I mean, I was interested from the very beginning, but it was after reading a few of the segments and reading a little bit of a review of the book itself that I was like, I am so reading this. This is not going to be dry. It's going to be a very interesting story.
I'm going to take your word on that and download that as soon as the show's over today.
So Sierra Nevada Otra Vez ale brewed with lime and agave is something we'll be trying on the show. Buffalo Bayou's Crush City IPA, that one is new. It's a brand new IPA from the Buffalo Bayou folks. And Young's Double Chocolate Stout.
Oh, I know that one.
Yeah, I had a feeling this was something new for you, but we've never reviewed it on the show.
You know,
so.
we need to talk to Buffalo Bayou and get them on the show because they have quite a few offerings that are pretty good. But my favorite from them is the 1836.
Oh my
it's called
God! Yes,
Copper Ale. They just
that
kind of
beer
invented
is
this, as far as
yes.
I know,
and
it's delicious.
That beer has the most wonderful chocolate notes to it on the finish, and it's
a
not
lighter beer.
Right, it's not like a chocolate beer or a stout that you would expect. It's more of like on the finish. There's just this very light chocolate. Oh, it's so good.
That's a delicious beer. That's a go-to. We have had that in kegs. We've had that in cans, and everything else. Are delicious.
Plus, we'll be trying a whiskey from the menu here at B&B. So we're excited about that. You know, Jeremiah does such a great job curating their whiskey list. So,
and he's not here, but we have our man taking care of us today. His name is Rico, and he actually has recommended the one we're going to try.
By the way, Jeremiah just texted and said, "You guys get set up okay. I'll be there shortly." So we will be looking forward to Jeremiah joining us on the show because it's always more fun when he's here. Plus, you never know what whiskey he might suggest to
There's
try.
that, too.
Yeah, so, all right, so we have all that to look forward to, plus the story of the graduating seniors at a high school in Saugus, Massachusetts, that are on their championship lacrosse team that will not get to play in the postseason playoffs because they lit up a cigar after graduation.
After graduation.
Yep, we'll tell you that and why that's ridiculous. Plus, Gurkha's raising their prices. Pete Coors is speaking out about the whole craft versus big beer argument, and beer sales are up. We'll be back to tell you all about it, and I'll tell you a little more about the Chupacabra coming up. It's Smoking and Toasting, show number 91. Welcome back at Smoking and Toasted. My name is Cruz. My partner is Ian Barry. This is the program that's all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. It's show number 91. By the way, I didn't tell you the title of the show today, although if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it as a podcast, you've probably seen this already.
Drum
but
roll.
The title of the show today is Putting Whiskey in Our Armpits. And I will tell you why that's interesting coming up. Plus,
because it's like cologne.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, that's not it.
It's
I mean, who doesn't, a little this,
No, I swear, officer, I have not been drinking. That's my cologne.
Right.
Beer sales are up. We can tell you about that coming up here in just a few moments. And Jeremiah Butler from B&B will be joining us a little while on the show, or at least that's what his text says. So we're looking forward to that.
Update.
Yes.
The Tabernacle cigar. This thing has... So I'm about an inch into it at this point in time. It doesn't look like it because it's such a long cigar in the first place, but about an inch into it. The spice has maintained, but it's got this beautiful chocolatey and espresso kind of deliciousness to it going on.
I'm liking it already.
Right.
I'm wishing I would have chosen that one now. I'm loving the Chupacabra. Don't get me wrong.
It's not a giant silky smoke, but it's a good, solid mouthfeel kind of smoke. It's nice. So I looked it up. This is Nicholas Melillo.
That's easy for you to say,
right? I'm slaughtering that. Sorry. Founder of Foundation Cigar Company has gone Old Testament with his new cigar line. I'm reading this off of Cigar Aficionado, so we can thank them for the words here. The Tabernacle, which encompasses themes of King Solomon and the legendary Ark of the Covenant. Let's see. Tabernacle is a dark Connecticut broadleaf made in Nicaragua. Guess where? At AJ Fernandez.
So no wonder you're getting the chocolate and the leather there. Wow. So AJ is just everywhere, Ian. The man is like ubiquitous at this point.
So I was wrong about the
about it being
Nicaraguan, right? Under the broadleaf wrapper is a Mexican San Andreas binder, and filler tobaccos from Honduras and Nicaragua. This thing's all over the place, but it's delicious.
Wow.
So this Lancero, I haven't tried any of the other ones, but this Lancero version of it is just a delicious cigar.
How powerful is it?
I would definitely put it at the bigger side of medium, like already. But it's not harsh. It's got spice, but it's not too brutal. It's not killing my tongue. I don't get that tongue bite, sometimes you get on the front of it. But I do realize that I'm generally smoking a much bigger ring gauge, so I have to be careful not to hotbox this cigar,
Right.
as a Lancero will get bitter pretty quick if you smoke it too hot.
Now, I am getting a little tongue tingle off of the Chupacabra, but then again, it is called the Chupacabra. So you kind of have an expectation that there's going to be some power here.
It's sucking the soul out of your tongue.
Yes, it is. But it's quite good. It's pretty powerful, but very complex so far. I'm getting accustomed to the flavors. I'll try to give you a little more detail on that.
I'm not
going
to lie. That one was not recommended. That one I just picked up because it looked awesome, and guess what it said? Chupacabra, and the size was called Hellcat.
Well, there's things to like all over the place on this. Plus, I have had a number of the other sizes and iterations of the Esteban Carreras.
That's the Carreras, the name is always good.
It's very good, yeah. I've always had. And these are cigars that, interestingly enough, are not overpriced. You see them in the humidor, you go, I bet that's an $18 cigar, and then you find out, no, it's $8 or $9.
No, I think I spent $9 on that cigar, maybe $8, and none of the cigars I bought yesterday were particularly expensive. The one that I'm smoking now, I believe, is in the $11 range, and if I was going to make a judgment call right now, I'd say I'm enjoying it $11 worth.
Show that to the camera. That's good. That is just a beautiful cigar.
It really is. Look how dark
really
the wrapper
yes.
is. It's not a particularly oily wrapper, but it is a very toothy wrapper. It's a very leathery wrapper. And that's another thing. Like, sometimes you pick up a cigar. I almost say guitar because that's what else I do. Sometimes you pick up.
Sometimes you pick up both.
Sometimes I do actually pick up both. But sometimes you pick up a cigar and you feel that construction. You go, that just feels like a well-made cigar, and it gives you kind of that warm fuzzy, and you go home and burn it.
Yeah. I'm enjoying this. I will say, when I first clipped it, it peeled a little around the head, which is kind of a pet peeve of mine.
And it had a little pigtail on it too,
but
right?
It did settle down. I was able to kind of get it in place, and it's not flaking further. So, enjoying it so far. I'll give you more details on the flavor.
Sometimes just dampening the end a little bit, it'll stick down and it doesn't become an issue.
It's amazing what spit can do.
Right. I will tell you, if I get a cigar that cracks and I can smoke it after it gets a little damp, it's fine. But if I have to put my finger over like a crack or a hole to make
that
it
makes
smoke,
me crazy. Yep.
I'm done with it.
Done.
That cigar's gone.
Does that change for you if the cigar costs more? In other words, are you more likely to stay with a frustrating $12 cigar than a $5 or $6?
Yeah.
But the
$5 or
$12
$6 cigar, I wouldn't even think about it. I'd be done, I'm not going to mess with that.
But the $12 cigar, it hopefully would be less likely to have that happen. But it could happen. It could happen.
They can be abused too. I've had cigars that have been a little abused, or maybe they weren't humidified exactly right, or maybe my humidifier wasn't exactly right for a few days. These things happen. But most of the time, I've found if you get cigars that look like they've been abused a little bit, you can leave them in your humidor. And I have 4 drawers in my humidor, so the bottom drawer is the closest to the humidifying elements, which sit under the drawer. So I'll take cigars that look like, if I get some that look like they've been abused a little bit, a little beat up, and I'll start them in the top drawer, and then every couple of weeks I'll move them down a drawer until
you rotate them down to the closest to the humidification.
Usually they smoke pretty well. I mean, I smoked a Cuban that was just torn up.
Really?
And it looked terrible. It looked like something you just go ahead and throw out, and it smoked just fine. Like it stayed together. It looked awful.
Speaking of cigars that kind of fall apart on you, Gurkha is raising their prices.
Now, have you had a Gurkha recently?
I tell you what, the last Gurkha that I had, because I almost swore them off at one point, but the last Gurkha that I had was that little guy, the Chairman's Reserve, Cellar Reserve.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. And I actually had gotten one of those. A friend of ours that we met gave us one of those, if you recall, when we were out at Presidential Cigars. And I actually bought like a half box of them at one point and enjoyed them all. So those were good. But some of the Gurkhas I've had have just had the flavor's great. It's construction has been the issue.
I've had the same issue, but I want to challenge us on this. Okay. Here's the Gurkha challenge. Okay?
Fair enough.
And let's try and do this before the prices are raised. Okay. To get a couple of their old school offerings,
right,
and try them and see if they're because I used to love Gurkhas.
Well, the flavor of Gurkhas are fantastic.
Yeah, and they're never like big, full flavored cigars. Usually they're medium or mild. but they're good flavor cigars. But then their construction, this was a few years back especially, their construction just went downhill.
Yes.
And they all fell apart on me. So,
and they were making so many different iterations of cigar,
so many
too.
flavors, it's hard to keep up with. Mm-hmm. But I see them everywhere, and they're popular. So I got to wonder, okay, if we try a few of those old Gurkha standbys, maybe their quality controls come back up. I haven't given them that chance yet, but I think like after today I may do that.
Here's what I'm thinking. Perhaps you and I should get together, have something good to drink, and, enjoy a little Gurkha challenge.
This sounds like a research opportunity.
It
that
does.
Would be hard
and
to
research
pass up.
is so important to this show.
It is very important to this show.
It really is. So
we research so that you don't have to, although we do encourage you to.
Yeah, yes, we do. Speaking of encouragement, by the way.
I love that sound.
Yes,
that is beautiful.
It's time to crack open the Sierra Nevada Otra Vez.
I love the can.
Yeah, it really is. You can see the lime and agave, and that's exactly what it is. Brewed with lime and agave. I don't know if that's close enough to the camera for you to be able to see it, but I'm going to ask Adam to do the pour for me. It's certainly a seasonal. If it's not brand new, it's a seasonal, and just one that I have not had the pleasure of trying before. So
I think on that can, they managed to capture both the Sierra Nevada can look, which is very distinctive.
Yes, absolutely.
They captured the Sierra Nevada can look, but they also captured the Mexican-style lager beer look, too.
Absolutely.
Which is kind of an interesting
kind of a tricky thing to do both. No, absolutely. You're absolutely
and blend
correct.
those two things. So kudos to their artist on that one.
Yeah, well, Sierra Nevada, I feel like gets it right more often than not. I mean, I just feel like these are guys that have a.
Now, didn't we have an IPA from them not too long ago?
Yes, we did.
That was delicious.
We enjoyed it very, very much, and I love their sidecar. We had a get together at the house the other day, and Adam had brought one of those little mix packs and had a sidecar in it. The sidecar is the one with the orange in it. It's the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale with orange, and it's delicious. We've had that on the show before as well. So,
the sidecar.
But this is the Otra Vez. I think a very different style, because Sierra Nevada has a tendency to stay in the pale ale IPA range with a few extra excursions here and there from time to time. So I think this is going to be a little different, or I'm expecting it to be.
Just put that on your nose. This smells like delicious limeade.
It really does. It's limier smelling than I would have expected.
And lime, like both together, and it smells delicious. Like
wow,
really
I've got to tell you, I really like this. And I'm going to be honest, although I will always give Sierra Nevada the benefit of the doubt, I did not have the bar set too high for this for me, because I just haven't had a lot of beers where they've used agave or tequila flavorings and felt like it was two tastes that went well together. Even though I love to have a beer on the side when I'm sipping a fine tequila, I do like that pairing, but something about having them together in the beer did not work for me. This, however, works, and it's refreshing. I think it's delicious.
I want to point out a couple things, because my thoughts are kind of all over the place on this. First off, it smells great.
Yes.
It smells like... it just smells delicious. It smells like dessert, in a good way. Not an overly sweet way, but in a good way. This has a little bit of that lime bitterness overall, that sour lime.
Yes, it does. It's more citrusy than I was expecting.
And my initial thought was I don't really like it that much. My second thought on this was, okay, I could probably get used to it. It's not bad. But the minute you said with a tequila, I bet this...
With a tequila.
With a fine tequila.
Mm-hmm. Yes, a good sipping tequila.
Like, as a back,
I don't know. Do you know anyone who might have some of those in their personal
so I have
collection?
this friend of mine that has quite a few tequilas in his collection, including this one, Skelly, that he keeps around.
Yes.
I think we had that on the show.
I believe we did, yes. And we'll do it again.
But I'm willing to bet my opinion on this would change drastically depending on what it's paired with. Also, now that I'm thinking about it, well, again, just by itself and maybe with the cigar, which has some espresso notes and stuff, which espresso and lime are not flavors you necessarily put together. Not
necessarily the combo.
But so that might be influencing as well. But I bet with a key lime pie...
It's got flavors of key lime pie.
Or with shrimp tacos. Like, that's what this is making me
You
do.
are
Like, this
speaking my
needs-
language,
This
my friend.
really needs something to pair with, and I think it would be pretty amazing.
Well,
actually.
I really, say I had the opposite, but again, my expectations weren't real high for this because I've not liked agave-flavored beers much in the past. And I will tell you that this, right off the bat, I loved the flavor. I loved the lime fizziness of it. Like you described it on the nose as being kind of like a limeade. And that's... You get a little of that vibe. It's quite good. I think it's quite good. And this would be a perfect summer sessionable around the pool beer for me.
Yeah, I agree.
All right.
This needs some kind of dry baked good with it too. Mm-hmm. You know, like a wedding cookie. I don't even like wedding cookies because they're too dry, but that seems like it would go well with that.
I wonder how this would go with Chef Tommy's bacon here at B&B.
We might have to explore that. Research coming right up.
Yes, sir. You are listening to Smoking and Toasting. We are in one of our favorite spots in the world. We're at B&B Butchers and Restaurant in Houston and Washington Ave. So beer sales are up, plus people are putting whiskey in their armpits. And I'll tell you why and how and why it might actually work. All coming up, plus more tasting is on the way, and Jeremiah Butler from B&B will be joining us. You are listening to Smoking and Toasting. Welcome back, my friends. Smoking and Toasting is live at B&B Butchers and Restaurant. We're at 1814 Washington Ave in Houston, and B&B is also located in the shops at Clear Fork in Fort Worth, and we will be headed there sometime very soon, I promise. Also very soon, Jeremiah Butler should be joining us on the show. I think he's on his way in. So this is early for him because he works, he's here till late at night.
Late.
So,
yep.
Yeah, so
we're
he's on his
catching
way.
him in his morning ritual.
Now, Now, I thought I'd give you a little bit of an update on the Esteban Carrera's Chupacabra. This cigar, I think, started out for me a little bit peppery on the tongue, which I don't dislike, but it was a little more one-dimensional. As I've hit what's, approaching the halfway point, this thing is blossoming beautifully.
Nice.
The flavors are really coming alive in this. I'm getting notes of I always feel like it sounds so like snobby to go. I'm getting notes of leather and seedlings, but it's kind of a nutty, toasty flavor that has just a little bit of leather and maybe just a hint of I don't know if it's cinnamon. There's a spice in there. I'm not able to put my my finger on, but it's not a pepper spice. It's more of a different sort of savory spice.
No, but that might
to it.
even explain that bite on the tongue you were getting a little earlier.
Yes.
Because cinnamon will give you that little bit of a bite. That cinnamon's pretty hot on its own.
I will tell you also one of the things that I was doing when I wasn't getting a lot of complexity at first. One of the things I do, and you have to be careful doing this, and I'm probably just weird that I do this, but sometimes if I'm not
Are
really
mutually excused?
no, not
statements?
at all, not at all. One of the things I will do sometimes if I feel like I'm not really able to pull the flavors out of the cigar that I'm thinking may be there, is I will actually just let it burn, kind of under my nose a little bit, and just inhale the smoke. Not inhale, but smell the aroma of the smoke that's coming off the cigar. You ever walk into a room?
That would be experiencing the room notes.
Okay,
sir.
yeah. You ever walk into a room, somebody else is smoking a cigar, you're like, man, that cigar smells amazing. And sometimes I'll get a little of that, and then it feels like I'm better able to detect those flavors.
It's almost
when I'm actually smoking
a third-person perspective.
Yeah, but you said experiencing the room notes.
Experiencing the room note.
Was that just you making that up in your head, or is that a thing?
Well, room note is the term.
Room note's a thing, sure.
Right, that's the term we use to talk about how it smells when you're not the one smoking it. Because when you're smoking it, you get a different flavor experience.
Of course, yes.
And sometimes being able to step away from that flavor experience and experience the room note of the cigar gives you another perspective. You'll pick up different notes. So I think what you're actually doing there is you're experiencing the room note and letting that help influence the overall flavor.
Yes.
And I think that's not too far different from when we smell whiskey or beer, we kind of have our mouth open and we draw in from our nose and our mouth to experience those flavors like that. I think it helps you learn and understand more and more of the flavors and more complexity in the cigar.
It's also a little bit different, but similar to the retrohale. where you're getting
retrohale, you get different notes too.
Right, exactly.
Now, retrohale with cigars can be a little tough, so you want to be
careful. Yes.
You want to be careful with that, because when you're blowing cigar smoke out of your nose, especially if you have a pretty strong cigar, man, that can make your nose burn.
It's not so. If you're on your first, second, third cigar, don't try the retrohale. You need to be a little more experienced, I think, at doing that.
Right, and even some of the great cigars that we've had on the show don't retrohale very nicely, but some cigars do.
It just depends on the smoke. You're right.
So I think it really does. This cigar is building in intensity, but it's not building in spice, really.
Interesting.
The flavor is definitely in the full side.
But not necessarily spicier.
The smoke itself has gotten more interesting. It's developed a lot. You said notes of leather. I'm getting that definitely, but I also get some maybe some almost like oak or some woody kind of notes in there that I'm really enjoying. There's no nuttiness to this, but definitely a wood kind of dry finish. Like when you have a really good dry wine, you get that nice that dry finish.
Sort of dryness on the end, yes.
Yeah, it has a little bit of that. I'm really kind of enjoying this
experience. I am enjoying this more and more. In fact, I'm probably smoking it too fast now because I'll be done with it before the show is over. So, beer is up, but there's trouble in tequila land.
Tell me about trouble in tequila land.
I will, no, this is not a good thing, but let's start with the good news. U.S. beer sales in dollars increased 4.1%. And volume sales increased 2.1% through the 4 weeks ending on the 20th of May. That's according to IRI Worldwide, which is a market-based research firm that tracks these type of things. Increased dollar sales in several segments, including cider, imports, domestic super premiums, flavored malt beverages, and non-alcoholic beverages. Those were all up in a big way. Now, I'm not going to totally dump a bunch of numbers on you, but there are a few here that are interesting. Total U.S. dollar sales up 1.7% to about $12.3 billion through the first 20 weeks of the year.
Nice.
And Boston Beer Company, we talked about this, I think on last week's show, continues to rebound. Dollar sales have increased 16.5% for the Sam Adams Company. Interestingly, the Samuel Adams seasonal beer and the Sam Adams 76 are the things that are driving this on the beer side. Part of what's driving this is their Twisted Tea and Angry Orchard.
Oh, yeah.
That stuff is doing very well. But Sam 76 is a big hit, and their seasonal stuff is up 33% year over year.
Nice.
So Sam Adams definitely doing some things right. Sierra Nevada, we just tried one of their beers in the last segment. They've posted positive sales numbers so far, but what's interesting about them is that their flagship pale ale, which is one of my all-time go-tos,
that's a good beer.
It's actually down 4.9%. The Torpedo Extra IPA, which they've had for quite a while, is down 8.2%. But their latest seasonal release, 35.7% increase. What I think is interesting that's happening, and you see this reflected a little because even though the Sam Adams numbers are up, Sam Adams Boston Lager, which is their flagship brand, those numbers are down. What I think is beginning to happen is that as people are exploring craft beer and they're trying all these new things, people are cycling back around to maybe they've been drinking Sam Adams Boston Lager or Sierra Nevada Pale Ale for years, and because it was at one point might have been only the only really good thing that you could find, right? So now you've branched out, you're trying all these other things, and then you cycle back around because you go, oh, Sam Adams has a Sam 76, I got to try this, or Sierra Nevada, look at this seasonal, this looks great, I'm going to try this, and you try it, you like it, you buy more. I think it's getting harder for the larger craft brew companies to maintain sales on their core, the one that started it all for them.
I think what really happens with that, though, is, say, for instance, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. We all know that one. We've all had that. You've probably had that. Even if you're not much of a craft beer drinker, you've probably tried it at some point in time. It's such an industry standard. Same with the Sam Adams Boston Lager. Same with quite a few brands like that. In Houston here, it's Shiner. In Texas, generally, it's Shiner. And even on the local side, St. Arnold, I don't go buy their amber ale.
Right, but that was
buy
the
every
first
one of
St.
their-
Arnold
right.
that blew our minds,
And I buy every one of their seasonals, but I think what ends up happening, we go through a process where, we find an offering like that, and before there wasn't that many, and we really are loyal to it,
Right.
I drank a lot of Shiner because, frankly, as a musician, you go into any bar regionally, they always have Shiner. It's always on tap, and the bartenders are always kind to a musician drinking tap beers.
Right.
And that's a good beer. So, all those things really made it, a go-to for me. So what happened is, because I enjoyed it so much then, I see it on the shelf and I go, I like that, but I want to try this.
Right,
and,
exactly.
And so we end up
doesn't mean you wouldn't love it if you bought it.
Right,
Yeah.
we end up wanting to try different flavors instead of the known thing. We're willing to push out a little bit. I think that the seasonal explosion, people are catching on to the seasonal thing. That's been going on for years, but I think people are really catching on to it.
Oh, I'm going to try the summer beer. I'm going to try the
I like
Christmas
this beer from them, so they have this seasonal. Let's see what this tastes like. And not every seasonal is a total winner, but I'll almost always give them a try.
Sure.
And what's funny, I mentioned St. Arnold's earlier, I very rarely go by their amber ale, which is their flagship, and you can find it most places. However, there's not a seasonal that goes by that I won't buy and try from them.
That's right.
And it's because I love a lot of their different flavors that they're willing to do. I love the exploration of it. So I think Sam Adams went through a lot of that, too. They had a core line for a long time. And then they had just that for a long time. And then every once in a while they'd have a seasonal. But now they're starting to go, okay, we're branching out. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to point out, too, that the ciders and stuff, they have the Twisted Tea and all these other alternative
Angry Orchards.
right.
Yeah.
What are they called? Ready to drink cocktails.
Yes.
Because we had some of those on the show the other day. By the way, those Bloody Marys.
Oh, yes.
Man, those were so good. Anyway, the spicy ones were amazing. But I think people are going, okay, we can get other quality drinks in a can. We had Austin East Ciders on here, and I will tell you, I have put a dent in Austin East Ciders in town because
their cider is terrific.
I didn't think I was a big cider fan because cider's always way too sweet, way too thick, way too sticky. And Austin East Ciders comes out adding no sugar and it's dry, it's crisp, it's delicious. It's still a little sweet because it's cider, but it has all that dryness to it. So my flavor profiles have changed a little bit too,
And their cider is really more for people who like beer.
Yeah, well, the hop
want a
cider is amazing.
Oh, fantastic.
That stuff
fantastic.
is outrageous. Now I tried. They have a blood orange cider, and I'll go ahead and tout Austin East Ciders on this. They have a blood orange cider that I can't buy. It's way too easy to drink. I mean, it goes down.
Yes.
Way too fast. It's unbelievable. It's ridiculous.
It's very good. A couple other quick things I want to share with you from this article about growth, because I think you'll find this interesting, Ian. Dollar sales for several craft beer companies have grown by double digits in 2018, including Founders, 48.7% increase.
Good for them. I love their brewery.
Bell's Brewery, 10.1%. Firestone Walker, 14.2%. And Dogfish Head at 17.7%. Year-to-date sales of several top craft offerings are also growing by double digits, including Founders All Day IPA, up 52.3% this year. Firestone Walker 805. Remember, we had this in California, and you and I have just recently discovered that it's available here.
We're actually the reason.
Yes.
that the Firestone Walker
20.8% increase.
That's amazing.
Bell's Two-Hearted Ale, 17%.
And that has to be attributed on Bell's, especially. Not only is that a great beer, by the way, wonderful pairing. Bell's Two-Hearted Ale and Basil Hayden Rye. Those two things go together it's amazing. And
another beer that we've had on the show, and again, maybe it was because of our rave review that sales are up so much.
That, plus the fact that they now have bigger distribution, probably has something to do with it. It's probably us, actually.
And Cigar City High Life IPA up 66.8%.
We just reviewed that one, so that one's definitely due to us.
Yeah, I think that's definitely it. And you notice, by the way, how much busier B&B Butchers is since we started doing our show here every once in a while, and since they started as a sponsor. I'm just saying.
That's pretty amazing.
I'm just saying.
Thank you for your support.
Tequila is not doing the news is not as good for tequila. And it's because of something that's happening actually with farming all over the place. Corn has become such a huge and profitable crop, that some farmers are switching from more difficult to grow or more time-consuming to grow crops to corn. And it's beginning to happen in Mexico as they're abandoning the slow-growing agave plants on many farms to cash in on corn, beans, and other food crops, all of which have become much more valuable over the past several years. Martin Sanchez, who's the Director of Agriculture for Mexico's Tequila Regulatory Council, says that white corn in Mexico is selling at its highest in at least a decade, and agave is selling for as little as 2 cents. So,
now, is that only for food crop, or is it because corn is also used as a fuel?
Well, it's all of those things. It's all of those things. It's a they're predicting, and we've been hearing this for a while. They're predicting that there are going to be shortages of tequila in our future because of a number of factors, but including that.
That makes me sad.
That makes me very sad, and it makes me want to go and buy more tequila after the show and start hoarding it and stockpiling it at my house.
Somebody's going to go, hey, we need to go. Oh, look who I see coming in.
Yes.
Somebody's going to go, hey, we need to grow more agave plants, and then they're going to start doing that, but they're going to charge more.
Yes, exactly right.
Which is going to drive tequila prices up.
Yes, and we don't want tequila prices to go up.
Madness.
We do, however.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Jeremiah has joined us on the show. You got here just in time. That is yours, yes. You got here just in time to taste some Buffalo Bayou Crush City IPA, the brand new offering.
Let me go grab a glass.
So, actually, we've got some cups here.
Perfect.
So I'm going to pass that to Adam and let him do the pours for the moment. So thank you, sir. We've been talking about a number of things on the show, but we saved this for you. The title of today's show is putting whiskey in our armpits.
Outstanding. Well, mine usually gets there by sweating it out on a day like today.
It's on its way out, not on its way in.
Give me about 5 minutes. I just got out here.
And you're in a jacket too because you're ready for work. So, yeah, all right, very good. Well, we're gonna be trying some of this Crush City IPA from Buffalo Bayou, and these guys make some. We were talking earlier about how much we love their 1836. Do I get the year right?
1836 Copper Ale. Great
how
offer
fantastic that is!
Great releases. That Uncommon Cowboy steam beer they make.
Yes,
fantastic.
and
you had that here for a while. It was fantastic.
For a good while
absolutely.
Here. That is a fantastic beer. I wonder, can you buy? I haven't seen Uncommon Cowboy in stores. Do you know if
I think it was only on tap.
Yeah, I believe it's a draft only release.
Wow. Well,
they don't make a lot of it.
We made good use of it every time we've come to visit you here. That is for sure.
Yeah, I definitely tried to put a dent in it.
This is an interesting IPA. It comes in at I think 7% ABV, and this is a brand new offering from the folks at Buffalo Bayou, who've gotten more and more adventurous, I think, in their brewing of late.
Shocking, you guys got bacon.
Yes. Well, we talked about it on the show so often and realized that we'd never actually had it on the show and talked about the flavors while we were on the show. So
now I want to point out, it usually looks a little prettier than this, just due to the fact that it's not usually chopped up into pieces.
Yeah, I believe this was for ease of consumption.
Yeah, we had it chopped up into pieces so we didn't look totally awkward doing that on the show.
Let me jump right in on Crush City IPA. Big time citrus.
Super citrus.
Wow. And I'm a fan of the citrusy IPAs. I feel like it helps to tap down the bitter a little bit. You still get to enjoy the bitter, but the citrus helps offset it a little bit.
I don't know. This has a lot of bitter, but I like the bitter.
Mm-hmm.
It's a clean bitter.
It's a very clean, fresh bitter.
I feel like the citrus also helps this, in spite of the bitter, be it feels more sessionable than some IPAs. Like I'm not going to start getting that.
Right.
And at 7%, you wouldn't necessarily expect it to be sessionable, but it could be.
It feels
not
pretty
with
good.
An attitude like that, Cruz.
Hey, I'm not saying it can't be done, sir. Sometimes we just need a challenge. So a challenge can be an important thing to have in your life.
Zycar.
Yeah, that's Ian's very cool Zycar lighter. So. Why? Thank you, sir.
If you put your plate over here, I will put bacon on your plate.
I
will do that.
You have impeccable taste, sir.
Thoughts on your Crush City research, Ian?
Well, like I said moments ago, it's got a big bitterness to it. But I like the bitter. This is a bitter that can be described as very palatable bitterness. And though it has a bitter aftertaste, it doesn't leave you with that, like you said, that dry mouth kind of feel. It doesn't leave you with that. It leaves you with a clean bitterness.
It doesn't leave you with that pine cone vibe.
Exactly.
Well, I will say, I think the Buffalo Bayou people probably were a little disappointed in their timing because I actually saw this for the first time on shelves the day after the Rockets got eliminated from the playoffs. So I was bummed by that because obviously Crush City is one of the many terms that's been used to describe the progress of our very awesome basketball team. So
I'm also noticing.
Yes.
Well, this has a very hop up front and bitter aftertaste. It also has a malt in the middle kind of thing going on.
It does. Malt in the middle.
Which is just fantastic.
Which was one of my favorite rap songs. You remember that? Malt in the middle? Yeah.
It's in the middle. Rapper?
It's in the middle. All right. We're going to take a quick break and enjoy some bacon. We'll talk about it when we come back. And we got to talk whiskey. So we had an idea of where we thought we'd be going, but now that Jeremiah's here, we may defer to the expert. So we'll be right back. You are listening to and viewing Smoking and Toasting.
This bacon is so good.
Welcome back, my friends. It's Smoking and Toasting. It's show number 91, all about putting whiskey in our armpits. I'll get to that in just a moment. We're live at B&B Butchers and Restaurant at 1814 Washington Ave in Houston and in the shops at Clear Fork in Fort Worth. How's Fort Worth doing? Is it coming along? Yeah.
Very well. Actually,
good.
We were just the official food sponsor for the Fort Worth Invitational Golf Tournament last week.
Nice.
So that was a really cool thing. And then we just did a big Paper City party yesterday for Paper City Magazine.
Right.
I'm not exactly sure what that one was about. I just buy booze,
Sometimes if you just throw booze at it.
Yes.
Hey, if that doesn't work, I throw more booze at it. And if that
Just
doesn't
so
work,
you
I
know,
throw booze at me.
If me and you ever have a problem, that will resolve it.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
I might actually create issues.
I was going to say, I think I may have a problem
just so
with
we can make
up.
Now.
That works in so many different areas of life.
So bad. It can only be resolved with like Balvenie 40 year.
Yes, that's right. Well, Erica Fuke is a woman that was experimenting with different ways to control underarm odor and sweating. So she started putting hand sanitizer under her arms in addition to deodorant and found that for her that seemed to work. And then she and her husband Jason started talking about it and came up with the idea, well, you know what would be better than hand sanitizer? Whiskey.
It's definitely more delicious than hand sanitizer.
Pit Liquor was born.
Pit Liquor.
Her husband spent months reading medical papers and textbooks to find the right mix of alcohol and natural antimicrobial products to make the best
Pit
deodorant.
Liquor.
That's what the name is of their company. Pit Liquor. Pit Liquor. It says it right here.
We actually have Jeremiah speechless.
So should we call today's show Putting Whiskey in Our Armpits, or should we call it Pit Liquor?
I wonder how many guys just follow her around going, there's something about you.
Well, what's interesting is when they were working on the different, combinations of different whiskey, different antimicrobial products and stuff, she says that he would come to her in the middle of the day and go, how does this armpit smell? How does this armpit smell? And basically they, did it long enough that they perfected it. They call it research, Ian, which is not unlike, well, maybe it is unlike what you generally call research. I don't know. But
so I'm imagining that the alcohol content of the whiskey is the most important, and this microbial thing, right?
Yes.
They couldn't use vodka and, save the whiskey? I mean...
They actually do use some vodka in the mix, apparently. So,
it's like a Long Island iced tea for your armpit.
Which seems even more unsettling somehow.
So, is this our next market plan here? We're going to sit down and figure out cocktails for your armpits? I feel like a Manhattan today.
They started this thing.
I'm wearing a little old-fashioned.
Yeah.
You mean Old Spice? No, I meant
old-fashioned, yes. They started it with a Kickstarter campaign, raised $20,000. Now it's a totally successful off-the-ground industry. They said the people that, pledged for the Kickstarter campaign that got some, So now they're coming back and ordering like 4 times as more. So obviously they're saying that's more deodorant than they could possibly use. So they're giving it away, and it's become quite a gift item and stuff.
Brilliant.
But if you want to look them up online, just Google Pit Liquor.
Liquor.
If you spell it Liquor, it might keep you away from some of the websites that would be.
I'm quite sure that armpit whiskey is not the first thing will pop up.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying you might want to do it at home, not at work.
That's
liquor
saying. With a Q, not with a
That's
K.
liquor with a Q. So now I don't intend to put
one word.
I don't intend to put any of this whiskey underneath my arms. It like you said earlier, Jeremiah, it might come out that way on the exit eventually. But you brought us 2 different whiskeys here. Tell us what we're looking at.
So this is 2 different whiskeys from High West out of Park City, Utah. Very, very, very successful distillery right now. Very much on the forefront. We've actually talked about this distillery briefly on a couple of shows when we've talked about how the American bourbon's being so heavily allocated. Lots of other whiskey companies are being able to kind of come in and fill some of these cool shoes. High West, oddly enough, as we've talked about that, the Blue Rye, which is an American blended whiskey. It's a blend of straight bourbon and straight rye. And that is now being allocated.
No kidding.
And you can smell the rye in there as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is a great example, though, of kind of like what I think is going to be kind of a great trend in American whiskey is in order to use less bourbons, you blend it. So you're starting to see, like, I believe Smooth Ambler has a one called Contradiction that is also a blend of bourbon and rye, like 50-50. But really, really cool. You get all the round corn notes, all that great vanilla, but you get all that really good spice note on your nose and all those good, like, baking spices. It's just a great, great whiskey. And both of these are exceptional for smoking purposes, for cigars. This one, I would say, is a little more versatile than the next one we're going to talk about. But I really enjoy the High West stuff.
I want to point out, first off, that this is a thicker liquid. It has a thicker liquor. Nice. It has a heavier mouthfeel than I was expecting, and but it's delicious. It's incredibly smooth.
Yeah.
The corn heat that you get a lot of times from rye comes back up on the tail end of this.
Yeah, you get a lot of the corn stuff in the middle, and then I feel like that rye bitter hits you on the back of the palate after you swallow.
And it's really interesting because it comes back as a nice kind of warm thing. Like, this would be a great thing. It's good in the summer. I bet it's really nice in the winter.
Oh, absolutely. And they make some really special winter releases. The Midwinter Nights Dram is unbelievable, but very, very, like, allocated. They're limited releases because it's such a small distillery. You just buy them when you see them.
So now when you say allocated, what does that mean to the average person who's looking for this?
Allocation to the average consumer. So the way that Texas works with liquor is it's what's called a 3-tier system. So you have supplier, distributor, Class B. So the supplier is High West. They sell it to a distributor, which I believe for this one is Republic. It could be Glazers. I can't remember off the top of my head. Sorry to either of those distributors. And then
his previous statement will be stricken from the record.
That's right. And then the last step is the Class B, so Tony Case. So an allocation means that the distillery says, okay, we have this much, so we're going to give this much to the X regions, and then the distributors say, okay, we have these accounts, and then they sort of kind of delineate, okay, I'm going to give this much to this account, this much to this account, and then you order through your Class B and you pick up your allocations. It's very similar to, it's exactly the way Pappy Van Winkle is handled. The Weller whiskeys now, like, so Blanton's, Yamazaki.
Which is why these can be more difficult to find, right?
Yes.
Because the allocation controls how much a particular store or bar can get their hands
on.
on.
For the consumer, it also very much affects the end price, because if I can only get it once a year, it tends to be more expensive, because the idea is that it'll stay on the shelf longer that way. Like, if you want to try it.
Rather than you get your Pappy and it's gone the first week you got it because
exactly.
Gotcha.
So in absolute layman terms, they only make so much. By the time it gets to the store themselves, after the restaurants and everyone else get theirs, after their bigger accounts and whoever has spoken for it ahead of time gets theirs, The store takes it and either puts it on the shelf or puts it behind the counter.
Right.
And then you walk in and ask, and if they say they don't have it, then they generally don't have it. But sometimes they do. Sometimes if you ask if they have something allocated, like Blanton's or
It has happened.
those kind of things, some stores will have it. Yes, we keep a couple bottles back here for certain customers, those kind of things.
Sure. Yeah, that's essentially, and then now, it works that way for the most part. I don't know, because essentially, like when the store gets there, because every restaurant has to order through a Class B of some kind, whether it be Goody Goody, Tony K, Specs. So a lot of times, like Specs will say, okay, like Specs gets their own allocation, and then they say we're going to keep X bottles for the store, and the rest of these go to the restaurants that order from us. So it's kind of a, and it's definitely a case-by-case basis. If you're one of the people that has worked out, your own kind of deal with them, with the distributor, and, you can kind of get a bigger allocation, and lucky for you.
So I was going to ask you that, and it's okay if you can't answer this, but if you can, is part of your job as a guy who's curating the liquor selection at a place here like B&B, is part of your job establishing the kind of relationships that might be able to get you a better input from the allocation?
Absolutely.
Or does that, or is that not really happen?
No, absolutely. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. Like, how much you purchase on a weekly ordering basis.
Right.
How big your account is.
How important a customer are you?
Exactly.
Right.
And then
If I open a bar tomorrow, I may not be getting a whole lot of the allocated stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then it also comes, like, a lot of people do other things, like Buffalo Trace will do things like with their Wheatley vodka, where in trying to build the Wheatley vodka brand, they'll do like a mixed 6-pack. So you'll get 5 bottles of Wheatley vodka, and the 6th bottle will be some highly allocated spirit.
I see. Something they know you want.
I was not supposed to talk about that one. That last part.
That last part will be stricken from the record.
Also stricken from the record.
I don't know who said that, but that, I'll say.
Rumor has it.
Wheatley vodka is a unique flavored vodka, actually. It's not a flavored vodka, but it has a unique flavor to it.
It's a really cool vodka, and it carries more cachet. Like, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, when somebody orders that or asks about it, you can say, "Oh, it's the vodka made by Buffalo Trace Distilling." Instantaneously, people are like, "Oh, well, I'd love to try that." You know?
Right.
So there's cachet.
And this is something I've really picked up on from you, from the different times that we've had you on the show, that a big part of your job is knowing and understanding what the stories are and communicating that to your staff so they can tell those stories as well.
Absolutely.
If I don't know that this vodka is the one from Buffalo Trace Distillery, I might not have a reason to try it. But if you tell me that, I go, well, I've had Buffalo Trace. That's awesome. Let's try it.
Well, and selling the story is to me personally, probably the most important aspect of sales when it comes to spirits. Obviously, if we're talking cocktails, it's different because cocktails have their own sort of history and things like that. But when it comes to just the raw spirit, the story is incredibly important because I feel like you get more like. Obviously, there's lots and lots and lots of bourbons. So why would I try this one? There's lots and lots and lots of single malt. So what's different about this one?
Why is this one that I should try next?
When I very first met you guys, we were doing the Whiskeys of the World event, and we did the Old Pulteney Navigator at the B&B's booth. That was a really cool story. The original distillery was only able to be reached by boat. That's why it was called Navigator, things like that. I mean, those are just cool things. And it's funny that you talk about that because the next whiskey we're going to try is very much part of one of those styles of whiskeys. This is the High West Campfire.
Okay.
So this is an American whiskey that has been smoked. So when you think smoke and whiskey, obviously the first thought is peated Scotch.
Peated Scotch, yep.
So the master distiller and the main cheese from High West is in Scotland, and he's in Islay. And so when you're in Islay, everything is kind of permeated by that peat.
Everything smells like peat, doesn't it?
Everywhere you go. And so they stayed at this very charming bed and breakfast, he and his wife. And he talks about how even in the morning they would eat breakfast, and the eggs would have this sort of infused like smokiness
peatiness
to
or smokiness to them.
and he just kind of fell in love with it. And it's a very nostalgic thing, like fire, camp smoke. And so that was kind of the birth of the High West Campfire. Is he wanted a whiskey that like made him have that nostalgia of being around that like smoky, and obviously being in Utah, there's a lot of camping, but outdoorsy stuff. So and sticking with the cowboy theme. But this is a phenomenal whiskey, and this one is great for cigars. Although this one's probably a little pickier, I think, than the Boo Rye. You probably need something a little bigger with this one.
So I was about to mention the cigar. The little update on my cigar, the Tabernacle. This thing has picked up in spice and intensity so much, and it's delicious, and it goes great with both of these. But I actually like the smokiness of the whiskey with this.
Yeah.
Because the cigar that I'm smoking finishes a little on the dry side. It has that little kind of oak dryness to the finish, or almost cedar dryness to the finish, whereas this right here has that peaty smoke to it, and really they kind of wrap right around each other in a beautiful way. This also has that kind of big oily mouthfeel to it as well.
And part of that, so that is something that when you start to notice that as you try whiskeys on other shows, whether I'm with you or not, is that's a big part of that is whether it's chill filtered or not. So chill filtration is when you distill a whiskey, you cool it and you skim it, kind of the same way you would do with a stock to remove fat. So you cool the whiskey and you pull out the fat solids and oil solids and a lot of what are called congeners. For example, in vodka, a congener is an impurity and it's a negative. In whiskey, a congener can be a flavor component and very much a positive. But the big part for me in non-chill filtered whiskeys is that oily mouthfeel, because it leaves all those fats and oils to coat your tongue. It makes for a longer finish.
Yeah, and I love that.
It makes for like a more deep kind of mouth experience. And then, the other part of it is like, I wish in the modern day and age we could kind of get rid of chill filtration, because it's kind of a dead thing. The reason that whiskey started being chill filtered was really more cosmetic, because
for
the whiskey
that
would sit on the shelf,
clear look on the shelf,
kind of cloudy, and people would assume it goes bad. And it's like, okay, wait.
No.
This sat in a barrel in a barn for 9 years out in nature, and now that it's like been sterilely put in a bottle and is hermetically sealed in that bottle, I promise it doesn't go bad.
But at the same time, there's a huge trend in higher proof whiskeys as well too,
which means over.
Right, which means when you put that whiskey on the shelf at 46 and above, it is clear, because a lot of times the alcohol amount. For whatever reason, clears up the cloudiness in it.
Yeah, and in modern
whiskey... You can probably explain that better than I
can. It's the suspension. So the alcohol percentage, the higher the alcohol percentage is, the easier it is for the oil solids to stay in suspension in a homogeneous mixture.
That's what I was just saying, actually.
Yes.
And so,
it sounded very much like what you said.
I could tell it's true.
Go ahead, keep going.
But and so it'll stay clearer. But in this day and age, you're absolutely correct. Most of especially like your smaller, more boutique whiskeys, are going higher proof. They're doing single barrel releases, bottle and bond releases, which have to come at 100. So it's a lot of this it was developed before that, but it's also still used in a lot of your more tame bourbons. Like your Basil Hayden that only comes in at 40%. And so at 40%, you kind of have to chill filter it if you want it to be able to stay and keep that clarity.
Stay at that, yeah. Right.
And so it's just kind of one of those, like, it's a happenstance of chemistry.
Now, is there a reason 40% was, or is the industry standard for whiskey? I mean, I've always wondered that, because when we talk about higher proof, 40% is generally the accepted.
It's what most of the whiskeys on the shelf are going to come
That's what you go by your
spirits too. Like most of your vodkas, gins, rums, most of those are going to come in unless it's an aged or overproof.
I'm sorry,
rum.
Not percent, but proof. It is percent. Sorry, so proof is the double of the number. So I just was wondering, is there any kind of reason for that?
I know that.
Somebody arrived at that
absolutely.
at some point in time.
I can definitely, I'll find that answer for the next time I'm on.
That'd be an interesting one.
Because I know it has to be something, because for bottled and bond whiskeys, it has to be at 100. So it's got to be 50% alcohol by volume, and that's like
to be bottled and bond.
Actually a government law for.
Now, does it have to be at
bottled and
least, or does it have to be exact?
bond. Exact?
Okay, gotcha.
100%, 100 proof, stored in it's stored and maintained in government warehouses. Bottled and bond kind of happened to sort of control like a bunch of the weird rock gut, like make you go blind stuff that was coming out.
Right.
And so when they decided to do bottled and bond, it was a way to maintain the quality and safety in its beginnings. And now it's one of those things where it's kind of become like a badge of honor for some of the guys that still do it, like, Mellow Corn, Rittenhouse Rye.
Yeah.
So it's kind of become this sort of.
It's kind of like in beer. It's kind of like the Reinheitsgebot. Like,
Yeah.
this is a set of rules that's laid down. This is a tradition, and
there's 4 ingredients. That's it. It was made this
Right.
way.
Mhm.
Yeah, 100%. It's very much that. But I don't really know how the sort of magic number of 40 probably
became the commercial.
Yeah, and I would have to imagine it had something to do with like dealing with it between like being considered a liqueur versus a true spirit.
Right.
Because the
A little hard
liqueurs
to tell,
come in
eh?
at 30% usually or lower.
Right.
And then you have weird guys that come in the middle. Like you have like aromatized wines that are like 22%. So they're not really like a regular table wine, but they're not quite in a cordial category yet, and they're certainly not like a spirit. Like Lillet Blanc or some of the Amaros that are so popular right now, like Chinar. But yeah, I'll find that out. I'll do some homework on that one.
I just want to mention that, and this is great support for your concept, Ian, of the whiskey sniff, because I would have said that with this particular cigar, the Chupacabra, I would have said after I tasted the first one, I would have said, well, there's no way the other one's going to be better with the cigar than this one is. And lo and behold, it is. And even based on the way you were describing them, I wouldn't have guessed that would be the case, because you said it was, maybe this the campfire's a little pickier, but there's just something about the smokiness of that and the exact power of this particular cigar that just marry perfectly.
It is the perfect amount of smoke in the whiskey.
I want to ask you.
It really is nice. It's not as obvious on the front of the palate, but towards the end of the palate, that smokiness just comes right back.
And it really gets you in the nose, But it's not
on the
heavy,
retrohale on it.
It's not a heavy parts per million though. So, and it's not peat smoke, so it doesn't necessarily carry that same exact pungent smoke. But the thing about this one, I love. And I know I said it before, I'm going to kill this word, but I love the nostalgic feel of it. It just kind of reminds me of like, you're on that camping trip with your grandpa and you're fishing, and he sneaks you that little nip of whiskey by the campfire. And,
campfire is a
smell like it.
I love that they called this that, because I have described certain cigars as having some of that campfire. And whiskeys and things like that having straw or like hay, and sometimes like burnt
absolutely
straw. This
or
this
wet
to
straw,
me,
wet hay.
Yeah, there
I
you go.
wonder how this would pair with something like one of those Drew Estate Kentucky Fire cured cigars that has that campfire aroma to the cigar
Challenge
itself.
accepted. I have a couple of those in my humidor.
Well, I believe I have a couple as well, sir. We just need to set a
We'll
day
be
and a
back.
time.
I
Yes.
was about to say, so maybe a month from today.
Yeah, that could work. Okay, when we come back in our final segment, I want to talk some more about these whiskeys, because I don't think we've really laid out the full flavor profile of them the way that I would like to.
That
And I
we
have
got caught up in the stories.
Yes, but I would like to ask you your take on the American whiskey scene right now, which is all over the place, and I want to know what you think about that, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, or whether it's heading to a good thing. We'll talk about all of that when we come back. Plus, Young's Double Chocolate Stout when we return. You are listening to Smoking and Toasting.
I just want to point out, I would put this campfire under my armpit.
Oh,
It would make me feel like a woodsman.
yeah.
So,
man of the woods.
Okay.
A man of the woods, like Justin Timberlake. And now I will tell you, I probably should say this on air, but this would be like a perfect gateway
To Isla?
To Isla, yeah.
Yeah?
Because that's still, like, I can appreciate it, but it's still not what if I go to the bar and choose something, that's not where I'm headed. It's not the taste that I'm looking for. But this being a little more subtle, but giving me a little of that, it really works.
There's another whiskey.
You might as well pick up the mic because people might want to hear this.
Okay, well, there's another
Might
whiskey.
as well do the mic.
Even though we're in break here.
There's another whiskey distillery out of Seattle, Washington called Westland that we've talked about a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
They've made a peated release. So this is an American single malt. So it's barley grown in Skagway, Washington, malted in Seattle, distilled and bottled in Seattle, and then peated. So they have their own peat bog because obviously where they're at in the Pacific Northwest is like not such a drastically different climate and environment weather-wise from Scotland. Obviously Scotland's a bit farther north, but from the moisture and all the rain, like you get these peat bogs, and so they're able to like actually harvest their own peat. They use the naturally occurring yeast that is on the specific strain of barley to ferment. So it's a very organic, indigenous, local product. But it's really, really cool because it's only about 22 to 25 parts per million of peat. So it's very, very subtle. Like when you think of a Lefroy 10, that's about 110 parts per million. So this is less than a quarter of that. And so you get the peat and it's there, but it's very gentle. And there's so much of the other like malted flavors in there that it's incredibly approachable to like the lay person for peat, like
when I was a kid and I was working, my father owned a greenhouse and I was working in the greenhouse putting stuff together. I was
that's what I called it when I worked in the greenhouse too, putting stuff together.
When I was lining the hanging baskets with peat, I had no idea it could be used for such better purposes.
Never thought about tasting it, did you?
No, didn't occur to me at any time.
My brother and I, we did the flower beds from my parents' house when we were in high school, and peat moss.
Oh, yeah.
Do you ever do, my brother turned me on to a drink years ago. Do you ever do a smoky martini?
I have. I don't do one here.
And for you out there, a smoky martini is martini, generally vodka with this, because gin has enough of its own thing going on, but a smoky martini is a martini vodka, and then you add just a dash of a good smoky scotch on top, and it is outstanding.
The other good thing to
We'll
do with
have to try
smoky
that.
scotch, if you've never tried it, is raw oysters.
Mm.
Take like a Lagavulin 16 and just put like a quarter teaspoon on each of your raw oysters.
Interesting.
Unbelievable.
That sounds fantastic.
That doesn't sound like a bad idea for anything.
Little mignonette.
Wonder how that would work on the bacon.
Horseradish and lemon. I'm phenomenal.
All right, let's do our final segment here. Welcome back. It's Smoking and Toasting. It's show number 91. By the way, I noticed, it's actually very pleasant here, but I have a tendency to sweat easily, and I was noticing a little wetness under the arm, so I'm wondering
We should put a little whiskey
if
on
I
it.
should put a little whiskey there. But I just hate for any of this to go anywhere besides on my tongue.
Agreed.
But,
Agreed.
That's Jeremiah Butler is here. We're at B&B Butchers and Restaurant in Houston. We're live here today, and this obviously is one of our favorite places to be. It's a beautiful day, actually. A little warm, but the breezes from all the ceiling fans and stuff make it very tolerable.
The wind is actually it's much more pleasant than I expected.
Yeah.
Walking in at 2 o'clock with a suit, I was kind of like,
we were worried.
My teeth, like,
we were worried about you.
Like, I got this.
But this is this High West. Tell me again the two iterations of this that we're enjoying.
So the two marks that we have. So we have one that is called the Boo Rye, which is a blend of bourbon and rye, like straight bourbon, straight rye. Now, it's different from because I can already see some people asking questions like, well, wait a minute, like how's that different from like a high rye bourbon? Mm-hmm. Well, so the difference here would be these are actually two separately made whiskeys
that are blended,
as opposed to saying I'm going to put rye in the mash bill of the bourbon,
right?
Which would be like a high rye.
Gotcha.
So and then or the kind of the opposite of a wheated. So like one of those differences between the high rye and the wheated is going to be the spice versus the round. So in a high rye bourbon, it's going to have more of that spicy eugenol baking on the nose. And then you're going to have more of in a wheated bourbon, you're going to have more of the vanilla notes. So more of the honey, caramel, that kind of thing. and they play very well together, which is why you can get away with rye or wheated bourbon, and they're all fantastic.
I think blended whiskey as a term is becoming way less looked down upon as it once was, because a lot of people would say, "Oh, I only like the single malt," or "I only like." But blending whiskeys is such an interesting process. Can you imagine the variables that go in? You end up with this and this, and you have to create the same flavor profile every time.
I spent a couple hours with Drew Mayville, who was the master blender for Seagram's for a while. He's now the master blender for Buffalo Trace. He makes Legacy, which we did on one of the shows.
Oh, that was fantastic.
We had Brett, who at the time was there. He's since moved on. He's still representing them, but he's in New Orleans now. But no, you're absolutely correct. I mean, blended Scotch still probably is having the hardest time getting over it, but they're kind of circumnavigating that by blending malts now as opposed to just blending Scotches. So you've got like Monkey Shoulder, things like that, which kind of have less of a stigma because it's hard to ignore a blend of Glenfiddich, Balvenie, and Kenenvy. Yeah. I mean, you kind of catch my ear with
I
that.
wouldn't ignore it. Yeah.
But like blended American is very, very much one of the two like the two trends that you're seeing, because bourbon is bourbon, and it's kind of like what you talked about, like exiting the segment. Like one of the biggest trends in American whiskey right now is this sort of quote unquote bourbon drought. And definitely some of the guys from the Houston Bourbon Society can tell you even more about it. Some of those guys are like...
I don't know. It can be hard to get Chris Hart to talk about bourbon.
Yeah, well,
sometimes you have to really twist his arm to get him to go there.
Whiskey bath. I'm still proud of myself. One of the good things, it's kind of cool that we're getting into some more details that we talked about very briefly before, was that I think that this bourbon shortage is good for American whiskey.
Okay, and why is that?
Because you have other people making whiskeys, and people are becoming...
It pushes creativity.
Absolutely, and people are less afraid to kind of branch out because bourbons are already getting boutique, and so, for example, like I said, like Smooth Ambler and some of these others, like High West. Okay, so if I have the same amount of bourbon and there's a higher demand for it, how do I stretch this bourbon farther and still get my whiskey out to people and still do creative, cool, limited marks? Well, you blend it. Mm-hmm. You put less bourbon out as just straight bourbon, which is why, like the Weller collections and all that, obviously they're not going to go that direction. They're just going to allocate what they allocate. You get what you get, and I totally respect that. I do wish that it hadn't got caught up with Weller 12, because my cheap go-to 12-year wheated bourbon has now become like a thing.
It's like when somebody discovers that band that you were the only person that really knew them, and now they're like super popular. It's like, oh man, do I still like them as much as I used to? Everybody knows about them.
That's a true story.
Now, but let me ask you this: when blending is being done for a blended whiskey, do all distilleries do that at the same point in the process, or do some of them blend it and then age it? Do some of them age it for a while, then blend, or then maybe even age again? Does that ever happen?
There are definitely both. There are aged, then blended. Mm-hmm. There are aged, blended, re-aged. A lot of what and again, I'm not 1,000% sure. I don't work at a distillery, but I believe a lot of what the way that's selected, is some of it is labeling, because there's a lot of rules when it comes to, especially to bourbon, with your label. For example, like if you age it less than 4 years, because the law says 51% corn, minimum 2 years, heavily charred, never used American oak barrels, right? So, but if you age for less than 4, even though the required minimum is only 2, you must put the amount on the label. So a lot of bourbons go a minimum of 4 years because they don't want to have to put any age on the label.
They don't have to put age for 3 years.
Not 2-year-old or
36 months in oak, that kind of thing. Like, and some distilleries don't mind that because of their technique. Like the Hudson Distillery, they do smaller barrels, so there's much more wood content or contact to the contents of the barrel, and so theoretically, you're aging it faster because more of the juice is touching the oak. So in a big barrel, that's why they rack them and roll them and move them and all that.
Quick aside, by the way, I saw on your list, on your whiskey list, that you have the Hudson 4-grain, the B&B edition. Now, that's not what we tried the last time we were on here. That was the regular 4-grain, and then you were going to Hudson to
Yes.
select
So what I
that.
have now is actually is out of the barrel. The barrel is actually hanging in the bar.
I think we have to try that.
Yeah, okay. We can make that happen.
I think we have to try
I've got a little bit of it.
Not today.
There will
Not
be
today,
time
but-
after the show.
Yeah, I got like maybe, I don't know, a couple bottles, like 156.
Will you do that again? Will you go
yeah,
back to
I believe
Hudson?
this year we are going back to do a rye barrel this year. So the barrel I'm going to pick out this year will be 100% rye. So that'll be really, really cool. I myself am a huge rye drinker. I love like the spiciness of it, especially like when you go through bourbon, like a bourbon phase, because I feel like for me it's kind of cyclic.
Yeah.
The only constant for me would be very heavily peated single malts. Like that's pretty much how I end a night of whiskey. If I've had a couple and a cigar, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna have one more and call it a night. It's almost always gonna be, a Lagavulin or
That's your finish, yeah.
Lafroy Kerches.
In a weird thing, I generally like the more peaty and smoky scotches in the wintertime, and then in summer I like the more fruity and lighter flavor.
No, that's absolutely.
For whatever reason, it just goes that. Same thing with like I smoke pipes as well.
Sure.
I generally will smoke pipes in the winter, not necessarily in the summer as much.
Huh. Now, do you drink your whiskey neat year round? Do you rocks at any point?
I am usually a rock in my whiskey because I like to try it neat, and then I like the flavors as they go from cold, and then the water diluting it. And because you get a whole ride. You taste it neat, then you get it cold, and you get those brighter flavors, and then as it warms up in your hand, and that water dilutes it, you get that add a little water flavor to it, and you get a whole experience rather than just having.
Absolutely.
To me, that works.
That's
It works every
exactly
time.
the journey that because I've had a lot of
Love
people
that.
that are surprised that as a whiskey aficionado such as myself, like, oh, I can't believe you just dumped a handful of ice cubes in it. I'm like, well, number one,
No,
that
that's
whiskey is
delicious.
132 proof.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because I like to, we drink big boy whiskey at my house.
grown up whiskey.
But the other part of it, I like a little of that dilution, but it's also what you're talking about. It's that journey.
Yeah.
And I like it to be cold, but I like the dilution journey of it as well. And then, because for me, you go, you pour it neat, you throw a couple cubes in it, you take that first sip while it's still warm, and then you go through that process. So, and I do it year round, whether it's winter or summer, and I even prefer in my single malts or my overproofs, I prefer the small cubes. Now, in a cocktail, I tend to do a big cube because
Right.
I want the cocktail to continue with its flavor. I don't necessarily want that dilution.
Right.
But in a straight spirit, I'm kind of looking for that diluted experience a little bit. And that's the only way I drink water when I'm drinking whiskey.
I'll point out one of my favorite flavor rides, whiskey-wise, is the Macallan Fine Oak 17. Because the first flavors on it are they have so much chocolate and dark fruit flavors and things. You add the rocks to it, and as it gets cold, you end up with almost apple kind of flavors.
Absolutely, apple
and then
notes.
as it dilutes, you get like the vanilla and floral flavors coming through. It's a huge ride. It's so different from beginning to end, and then you get to start over on the next glass.
Absolutely.
And a glass of it, and I'm talking about just a 2-ounce pour.
Sure.
And we're not talking about slamming a bunch back, but a glass of it may last 40 minutes. You know. Just because you're enjoying that ride so much.
I like when we do whiskey shows because Ian always has a lot to say about whiskey, which leaves me more drinking time. And some shows, maybe I'm doing most of the talking, and so
Those are called the IPA shows.
Yeah, I look, I'm not getting to taste my IPA because meanwhile Ian's like half a beer down. So real quick before we do some beer, the Young's Double Chocolate Stout as our dessert here for the show. There's crazy, what I would describe at least as crazy trends now in American whiskey distilling. People being very experimental, trying things that really I don't think have ever been tried before in whiskey. Just real quick, what's your take on that? Like, are you encouraged by it? Do you think some people are just trying too hard to be different? Or are there really good things happening in some of that? In some of those
I definitely
areas?
think there are good things happening. I mean, I as always, I think that in any industry you have to have a balance of new and traditional.
Right.
Like in Scotch, for example, right? Like there's always going to be Balvenie, which is kind of the most handcrafted. I mean, like the
which
Coopers,
is fantastic.
The Coopers and the Coppersmiths and the blenders that I met. I mean, these guys have worked for Balvenie for 56, 52, 53 years. You know, they're very much about the tradition. They're very much about this is
heritage,
how we do it. We do not budge, and that's great. There's a couple bourbons that are like that as well. But I think within that, there's also room for differences. Like in the Scotch world, you have, like Compass Box. Or there's an Italian company, starts with an S, and all they do is source Scotch barrels and blend them. And it's a very contemporary thing that they're doing, and a lot of times they're not even putting age statements on certain ones of them.
Right, you're seeing that more and more.
It's all about like the finishes or the blends. Like Glenmorangie is one of the more established houses that sort of jumped on that early, and they started taking age statements off of their single malts and naming it after their finishes. You had like, I believe it was the Santa that was like the Maris Otter floor malt, the Campanta, which was like the Madeira, finish, things like that. And they took the age statements off. And
the La Santa is one that stays on my shelf.
La Santa's great.
Always.
Yeah, La Santa.
Fantastic.
I love the Nectar d'Or.
Yeah, that one.
The Sauterne finish. But no, so I think it's great. Like, even within some of the more like domestic categories, Orphan Barrel. So Orphan Barrel, and they have some age statement whiskeys. They have some non, but they don't distill any of their own juice. They just buy these barrels. Hence, that's how they came up with the name
Orphan Barrel. Yeah,
and they blend it. Like the one I have right now, the Entrapment.
I saw that on the
a 25-year blended Canadian. And it's fantastic, but it's also, and unfortunately, guys, like, if you want to come and have some, you have to come now, because I only got like half a bottle, and after that, it's gone.
What also he just said is blended and Canadian is not a bad thing all the time.
No, and legacy, blended in Canadian. I mean, that is Drew Mabel. I mean, if Buffalo Trace is making a blended Canadian, I mean, obviously there's some things going on in that category.
Yeah.
Right.
If William Grant, as a company, is buying a Canadian whiskey distillery in Gibson's 12-year, there's obviously something going on in the category, and a big part of that is.
Oh, go ahead.
Is in the blending world. It's about having stores of whiskey, and so Buffalo Trace's warehouses up in Canada. I mean, you're talking 400-something thousand barrels. So, being able to blend whiskey, a big part of it is having whiskey to blend.
That sounds so good.
Now, this is one of those cans that has the little aeration device in it. Yes, the widget. This is Young's Double Chocolate Stout. I'm going to pass that over to Adam so he can pour for us. But
a perennial favorite.
This will be, this is one of those that, as familiar as many Stout fans may be with it, we've actually never tasted this on the show. So I thought it was high time that we corrected that.
I love this, but I'm going to look surprised when I try it. I do want to give an update on my cigar.
Yes.
Which, by the way, is a delicious cigar. And I'm enjoying it so much that I'm just about burning my fingers with it and still smoking it. This cigar has gone well with everything we've had, and I can't wait to try it with the double chocolate stout, although we better hurry or my fingers are going to burn.
Now, I know you didn't like it as much with the Sierra Nevada Otra that we started out with. I wanted to point out that during one of the breaks, I was looking at the can. This was the first beer we sampled, and realized that I didn't share this because I didn't notice it until just now. But it is a Goza style ale, which kind of explains a little bit of that fizziness and the sour
I like Gozas
salty
generally.
Yes.
But I think I decided on that one. I want that one with food.
With food.
Well, I tend to think most Gozas are food beers.
Oh man, this is like I feel like I just smelled a chocolate milkshake. Just getting the first nose of this. Oh my goodness.
First off, this is a standard. This has been out for years upon years upon years, and this, oddly enough, was introduced to me by my father. My father passed in 2008, and we got along so well when it came to bigger beers. He loved beers with big flavor.
Yes.
And whenever he went out, and this was in the early days of me even figuring out beers, he would go out and buy all kinds of different ones. If it looked interesting, he would buy it. And I remember him bringing home the Young Stout, the oatmeal stouts, the double chocolate stout, and trying beers with him. So this one brings me way back. I've had this before, and it is absolutely amazing.
What's interesting to me is that the chocolate is very much as you get it on the nose, you really don't get that chocolate flavor until the finish when you drink it. Up front, it's very much just more of a straight ahead stout, almost like a Guinness kind of a flavor in the very beginning.
It's got the nitro bubbles, which gives it that mouthfeel, that real creamy mouthfeel.
You talk about kind of how it takes you back, because like when you're telling that story, makes me think of when I tried this. So I used to live in South Austin near a store called The Whippet.
Oh yeah,
we love that place.
Very famous beer store, and it was one of the places that pioneered like the mixed 6-pack. And my roommate at the time, let's say I was just barely 21. I don't even think I was 21 yet. And my roommate would go and he would buy these.
That will be stricken from the record.
Yeah, he would buy these. There's a statute of limitations, I'm sure. But there was this, he would buy these mixed 6-packs, and he would always bring these really interesting, crazy beers that, like, somebody like me, like, coming from like the small towns, of Washington and Texas, I didn't have a concept of what craft beer was anyway. And I remember one of the first ones that I really took note of and was like bought when I could go and buy nicer beer was this one.
Really?
And
That's interesting.
It was just one of those, I didn't understand why I liked it. I didn't understand what the heck it was. I couldn't have told you nitro versus CO2, stout versus lager. At the time, I didn't know what any of the title or the terminology meant. But I knew I wanted to put this on some vanilla ice cream and make a float with it.
I was actually about to say that. It is delicious. I have had it that way.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to mention the Whip-In. I have some friends in Austin that I almost always stay with when I go to Austin. We go there. Me and my wife go there pretty often and go mountain biking and whatnot. When my friend was getting married, we decided we're not going to stay at your house. We're going to actually just get a hotel so that you don't have to worry about it. You're getting married and everything like that. So we got the hotel that was right up the road. It was the Best Western, whatever it was. But it's literally a block and a half from the Whip-In.
Oh, yeah, like
and we did
Old Tour for 935.
The Plus or whatever it is,
Yeah.
the Best Western Plus or whatever it is. We got that hotel so we could walk down to the Whip-In and then walk back up the hill to the hotel. And at one point in time, I was walking back with a box of all kinds of different beers on my shoulder like this.
That's awesome.
So it's about time for us to wrap. Jeremiah, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Absolutely, man. Thank you guys for coming and doing it here. It's
always so much fun to do a show here. This is one of our favorite places in the world, and wow, the whiskey selection was just fantastic.
Well, good.
I would say I'm sorry for running the show late too, but I'm really not because we had a great time.
Yeah, we really did. Thank you so much, and thank you guys for being a part of show number 91. We will be back next week, although Ian will be on location, so we have to figure out, are we going to be able to beam you in via some sort of electronic device, or
we're going to work it out? I'm going to record some interviews definitely and send them, and then Thursday I will be available.
All right, so we'll figure that out, and we'll be back with you again next week. Have a great week, my friends, and as we always like to say at the end of the show, cheers.
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 Clink, clink, clink.